Hello everyone. Today I will be giving a review of the new Gen 4 paddles by Vatic Pro, the VSol Pro and the VSol Power. In addition, I'll be using these two as a comparison with all the other Gen 4s out there. These paddles will be available to the public later on this month, and they will have a special launch design. They will come in 5 shapes, 2 elongated, 2 hybrids, and each will have different handle lengths. Additionally, they will have one wide body shape. We'll be using the long handle models as those are the ones I have, and it's an easier comparison with all the other paddles we will use. I won't go into the details or specifics of the design for these paddles, but if there's any interest, I will post a link below when there's a public release for these. We, the Salt and Brine Picklers, are not affiliated with Vatic Pro or any of the mentioned paddles companies at this time. Our opinions are strictly our own, and even in the future, if we do become affiliated with any of these companies, we will only make content with opinions of our own. These paddles will be priced around the $100 range and will be competing with the upcoming Ronbus Quantas as the best budget paddles for the year, although both, in my opinion, do not feel or play like budget paddles. The VSol Pro is considered the all-court of the new Gen 4 paddles for Vatic Pro, and the Power is considered their power lineup. However, the power level of these two are actually not too far apart from each other. However, the way they feel and play are quite different from each other. The VSol Pro feels fairly stiff with less dwell than the Pro. In terms of how the power scaling feels for this, it's more of a linear scaling, while the power is definitely more of a logarithmic curve. If you want to learn more about what it means for logarithmic or linear power curves, feel free to watch my video about power versus control. A good way to look at the V Pro versus the Power is if you have the YOLO Pro 4s. The 14 millimeters is more linear and stiff, while the 16 usually has a more softer and trampoline feel. I personally like how the VSol Power feels more than the Pro, as I have a huge preference for dwell and a bit of a softer face. For paddle preference, I like paddles such as the Franklin C45 and the Alpha Pro Power. Spin for both paddles are very good. Both paddles were very gritty to the touch, and shaping the balls were very nice. However, I cannot assess how durable this grit will last. For the power and pop tests, we use these paddles in comparison with other paddles using a radar gun, a Selkirk Pro ball, and in 85 degrees dry weather. We use different players with various skill levels and different serve styles, with multiple swings for each paddle. The paddles used for comparison were the Pro 4 Hyperion 60mm, the Selkirk Boomstik elongated, the Ronbus Quantas R4, the Honolulu Pickleball Company J2NF, the 11624 Alpha Pro Power Hirachi X. All were played in stock except for the Quanta, which had weights at the 3 and 9 to emulate the boomsticks. In terms of drives, the only significant difference was the gap between the Selkirk Boomstik to the Quanta. The rest are around the same. Along with other testers, I was thoroughly surprised by how close the VSol was to hitting the numbers compared with other power paddles. Pop was where we noticed a significant difference in playability. However, it was also harder for us to accurately measure these pops, as recreating volleys for each hit and each paddle was fairly difficult. Our loose impression of how poppy these paddles were was the boomstick was the poppiest. The Alpha Pro Power and the VSol Pro were on the bottom, and the rest were somewhere in between. In terms of sweet spot, both the VSol Pro and the VSol Power are around the average among the newer paddles today, which is still a good thing, as I would say the paddles right now have a really good sweet spot compared to the ones from last year. My big concern for the players looking for these models is, at least for the V7 long handle models, where they were quite head heavy, and I believe the specs that was estimated, that was given, reflects that. So with all these new Gen 4 paddles, how do they all compare against each other? Regardless of price, in my opinion, nothing is like the Boomstick at this moment. It is the pinnacle of power, pop, sweet spot, controllability, and spin. However, it has a very hollow feel, and some players might not need or even want that power. Playing with the boomstick requires a certain level of commitment. They shouldn't be scared of using that power, but if they are choosing to use that power, then there definitely needs to be a certain level of dialing in and getting used to that specific level of power. Although a lot of people say the Quanta is like the Boomstick, I would say they are very different. They do, however, have the same hollowness feel, and the sound that they both produce is a little similar. It has a different profile and different playability to it as well too. However, the Quanta has less pop, power, spin, and it has a significantly smaller sweet spot. VSol comes in two different profiles, the Power and the Pro, with 5 shapes each. These feel a lot different than the Boomstick and the Quanta. In my opinion, they have more of a classical paddle feel compared to the other foam paddles. These do feel quite head heavy at least. Well, at least the V7s that I have. This might be different for the other shapes. These are also very well priced in my opinion with the Quanta. The Honolulu NF series comes in a variety of shapes and handle length, and I will say this is the more well balanced paddle with a foam feel, similar to what you would expect from other foam paddles. These are very popular at this time because of how easy they are to fit into the majority of player base needs and wants, especially with the new shapes they have. However, I would say any of these foam paddles are really good. Overall, I would say the players are living in an amazing renaissance of paddles, and having to worry less about durability with these Gen 4 core technology is amazing. Any of these four would be a solid choice in my opinion, and it would really come down to preference and power, pop, feel, and finance.